Um, Uranium mining in the U.S., and I won't dwell on this because my co-speaker is going to say a lot more, happened mostly in the Colorado Plateau, a lot of it in the Navajo area, and that was really how I got interested in this issue. I grew up out there, and then later came back and did some work, an oral history project that drew me into the impacts that uranium mining had for the Navajo people. I'm sure that my co-speaker will say more about that. The first health effect that I want to talk about is radon and lung cancer. And what I want to say about radon and lung cancer is that it is was and remains one of the best studied environmental toxins that we're aware of. It is a singular achievement of epidemiology and science that we could understand by the late 1940s that radon was the reason that underground miners got lung cancer, and then by the 1960s and early 70s have a very good understanding of the dose-response relationship between radon and lung cancer. And so at a very early stage, we understood this risk and continued to, the nuances of it continue to develop. This is a graph, a figure that shows the 11 main epidemiology studies of underground miners that happen in the world, most of them in North America, but also in Europe and in China. And these studies consistently show excess relative risk for lung cancer at a very high level, near 1% increased risk per working level month of radon exposure. And that makes radon, first of all, the scientific evidence is irrefutable and extremely strong, but it also makes radon very possibly the most toxic substance that you can imagine. In incredibly infinitesimal, tiny amounts, it increases lung cancer risk dramatically. And we've known this for a long time. If you look at the risk for radon, it causes lung cancer in non-smokers as well as smokers, and it was a study of the Navajo uranium miners that showed that non-smoking miners are also at risk for lung cancer. And even at the US EPA guideline level of 4 picocuries per liter, this is the recommendation for the maximum level of radon that you should have in your house, for example, if your house is built in an area that has uranium. That would still result in 7 people out of 1,000 developing lung cancer, all right? And that's for non-smokers. If you look at smokers, the risk is appreciably higher because smoking and radon interact synergistically and multiply the risk. And so for smokers at 4 picocuries per liter, the risk is more like about 6% of the exposed people would develop lung cancer. These are very, very high risks, and radon is the second leading cause of lung cancer in the United States after cigarette smoking, for example. For the uranium miners, the impacts were dramatic and large. There are a lot of ways of looking at this that in the scientific literature, but I like this because it's a simple, direct measure. In the United States, there is a compensation system, the Radiation Compensation Exposure. The Radiation Exposure Compensation Act that compensates former miners and mill workers, and there are strict hurdles that each of these applicants has to go through in order to qualify for compensation. And so far, as of March of this year, they had compensated over 7,700 miners. So that means each of these miners had shown that they had a disease related to uranium mining and that they had worked for a period of time in uranium mining. So that's a substantial number of people. When someone tells you perhaps that the nuclear power chain does not cause any deaths or illnesses, this is a very simple, direct way of saying no, it does. Here we've got a very large number of people, a high percentage of the total miners, maybe the total miners are maybe 10,000 or 12,000 in the US. And the externalized cost of that is substantial as well, over $700 million, not from the mining companies, but from the US government, from the taxpayers going to the miners. That leads to a situation where now in the Southwest, or at least in the past, you had billboards advertising for law firms to help miners receive their compensation from the US government. So the situation for miners in terms of lung cancer from radon, as well as silicosis, which is the scarring of the lungs from the blasting of the rock, the freshly fractured silica dust. Those are very, very well established occupational hazards and beyond question in terms of their health impacts. Really the frontier for the last 10 or 20 years has been the communities that live near the mines who are not themselves going into the underground mines, but were exposed to the waste and the material that was left behind. And this is just one example that I use to show you that this risk is probably appreciable. This is in Monument Valley in southern Utah, again in the Navajo area. This is a Navajo home, a hogan, and what you'll see in the next slide is because this home was built with uranium waste from the uranium mines, the radon levels inside that home, as well as the radiation levels, were quite high. And these dots are the radon levels when they went back and measured this more recently, and here's that 4 picocurie per liter guideline that the EPA has. So you have a family living in a home with these high radon levels for a couple of decades. And this is not the only home, and there are multiple different ways that the communities are exposed. Besides radon, we know that uranium ore has a bunch of other contaminants. It has uranium, which I'll talk about in a moment, but also radium, thorium, arsenic, and ionizing radiation from those external ionizing radiation that people are exposed to, even if they do not inhale or ingest these compounds. Radium is known to cause bone cancer, cancers of the nose, and leukemia. Thorium is much less well studied, and maybe it doesn't get into the body very easily. That's an area that really could use some more scientific research, in my opinion. Arsenic also causes cancer, neurological problems, and skin problems, and ionizing radiation we've heard a lot about, I think, already today. Radium, we know that radium causes health effects from a number of sources, but one of them, a famous one in the United States, are the radium watchdial workers, who in the 1920s were girls and young women who painted watchdials with radium to make them glow in the dark, and then would lick the paintbrush to sharpen the tip in order to correct errors when they were making errors, when they made an error and so they ingested large amounts of radium. This is a picture. I always like to use images of the people who are actually affected because statistics are so cold and don't have the same emotional appeal that the actual human beings do. So this is one of the watchdial workers who developed awful jaw deterioration and problems from working in the watchdial factory. But they had large amounts of radium in their systems, and this is a cross-section of a femur of one of the watchdial workers at autopsy. This is an autoradiograph, and all the black areas are areas that are radioactive from the deposition of radium in her bones. So radium and uranium tend to deposit in the bones. They act like calcium in the body. They displace calcium, and they will stay in the bones for, as you can see, your whole, large amounts of it will stay for your whole lifetime. From radium exposures, we know that the short half-life radium leads to bone cancer in a shorter time frame, and longer time, the longer decay radium leads to bone cancer over longer time. So another very well-established causal association. For uranium itself, which is often a prime interest, we shift from the radiation exposure more to the chemical exposures. Uranium itself has a low specific activity Maybe the radiation from uranium itself is a problem, the way radium, with radium and radon it's the radiation. But it appears to me from reading the literature that with uranium the effects are primarily due to its chemical toxicity as a metal. Something like chromium or nickel, it's a little bit similar to that. And long established kidney damage in animals, as well as developmental defects in animals. And then also substantial literature, I should have said, change this slide a little bit, a substantial literature of kidney damage in humans who drink water that's contaminated with uranium. So this is the past. The future, the more recent developments in the effects of uranium, a lot of them are with regard to reproductive effects. And I think that is the leading edge of concern. There's a lot of evidence, scientific evidence accumulating and concern accumulating in that direction. This is just to introduce the next slide. This is an oocyte, which is an egg. This is a mouse, so a mammalian. Oocyte, which is the egg pre-fertilized. Once it fertilized with sperm, then it would form an embryo and go on to form a fetus. And these are oocytes, again, mouse oocytes. This is a normal one, the way they're supposed to look, without any uranium exposure. And the rest of these have been exposed to uranyl nitrate. And you can see the loss of the first polar body on some of these. That's a very common feature, but then also more gross abnormalities as well. This is an experiment, a series of experiments that I think is very famous and really important. It comes out of the Navajo area again. This young woman at that time, Raymond Wish, was at Northern Arizona University and did this research again on mice. And this experiment, unlike some of the other toxicology experiments, used uranium levels that were below those that you would find in some contaminated water that people actually drink. So a lot of toxicology experiments use high levels of toxins in order to see the effects in small numbers of animals. That was not the case here. These experiments are looking at uterine weight and testing whether uranium is an estrogenic compound. That's whether it has estrogenic activity or not. The control here is our mice with just water, no adverse exposure. The ICI is an anti-estrogen that protects against estrogen, so it doesn't have any effect if nothing else is going on. The black bar is using a chemical called DES, diethylstilbestrol, which I see Helen nodding at. I looked for you because I knew you would know what that is. This was a drug, a pharmaceutical that was given to pregnant women in the 1950s and early 60s, and it was a terrible error because it's an estrogen and it causes severe problems. In the women who took it. But you can see in this experiment in the mice it increases uterine weight dramatically because of its estrogenic activity. And then when you add the anti-estrogen, that effect is reversed. So that's all to set this up, okay, for the uranium. Here's when you add uranium. It does something very similar to DES. It increases the uterine weight dramatically. And more importantly, when you add the anti-estrogen, that effect is reversed. All right, suggesting that uranium is in fact an estrogenic compound at extremely low concentrations, concentrations that you could easily find people drinking in real life. And then also, consistent with a lot of estrogens, the lower concentration causes a greater effect than a higher concentration, and a lot of estrogenic compounds do that. It's a very strange feature. I don't think we understand totally the biology of why that happens, but it does raise some questions about how do you reduce exposure if lower concentrations are more toxic. This just shows that in graphs. Oops, I'm running out of time, but I'll finish up. Okay. So here's the uterine wall with just water. Here's with DES and then with uranium, and you can see the thickening of the cells in the wall. In mice, more experiments out of northern Arizona, that uranium forms strand breaks and covalent bonds with DNA, causing damage to genetic material. This is an experiment I want a study in humans, and I wanted to point this out. Some people might want to look it up. I learned about this because I reviewed this study for the journal Toxicology a couple of years ago. And they looked at people, this is in Portugal, not in the US, so I'm violating the title of my talk. But, and what they looked at is human beings living closer to a uranium mine and in a control community, and saw greater DNA damage in the people living close to the uranium mine. So you take the animal studies, genetics, reproductive effects, and then you begin to get some human studies. And these studies, all of them have some limitations, but that they're all pointing in the same direction, I think, begins to add up to mounting concern about genetic and reproductive harm. This I like to show because it shows chromosomal damage from DNA. These are cells, cultured cells, and this is the way those cells usually look in terms of their chromosomes. And then after incubation with a uranium compound, you can see that some of these chromosomes have moved. This 19 chromosome has moved and attached to the number 5 chromosome. Can't read the number. The 18 chromosome has moved and attached over on the 13, and also one here. So there's a lot of literature both in human populations, miners in Africa. There's a study from Nigeria, I believe, and then also people living in communities near mines in Texas and further from mines that show chromosomal aberrations. And then there are a bunch of animal studies as well. There continues to be exposure in the Southwest. This is some work that a former graduate student of mine did. You see there's contaminated water. There are people living near the mine tailings, children playing near them, cattle and livestock being raised near those. And there's research out at the University of New Mexico, and this is the last study that I'll show, showing that people who live closer to these mine features are at increased risk of hypertension, diabetes, and kidney disease. So this is a heat map which shows the combined risk of those three health problems. Each of the black dots is a mine feature, and then the color is increased risk. So you can see how the risk gets higher the closer people are to these mine features, all right? And so there's emerging evidence of community exposures being associated with adverse health effects as well, although that work is much earlier than the work with miners. I just throw this up because, this is outrageous. This is 2012 discovery of of an abandoned uranium mill out in the desert that was not on the list of the federal government. Hazardous waste sites, so it made the New York Times. And here's a walk over that site, and you can see the radiation levels. Black and purple are the highest levels, over 100,000 particles counts per minute. There was one spot that was over 1 million counts per minute. And you can see this is a highly contaminated, uncontrolled site, 2012. Indications that people have been spending time on the site and no controls of it. So I think I'll end there. I always end with the sunrise. It's not a sunset. It's supposed to be a little bit hopeful. This is when we were doing the uranium miner oral history project out in Red Valley in Arizona. I think my co-speaker would appreciate that I got up early in the morning and went out running. Those before my knees started deteriorating. I went out running in the dark, and when I came back, the sun was coming up and was so beautiful, and I took this photograph. So anyway, thank you for your attention. There's a lot more to this. Thank you. There's a lot more we could talk about, but time is limited. So.
Good time. Okay. Can you get going for me? Okay, thanks, Doug. Good morning. Yat Bene, she Leona Morgan Yinshke, Torich Eating Nishle, Tinal Bisney Bashichin, Kia Ani Dashiche, Tohlini Dachanella, she Te Hotsoi Dant Nasha, Shema Narish Dant Ado Shije East Ozid Dant Ado she Beldi that Senende Shagon Ado uranium issues by Nashnish. Okay, so hello, good morning. I just introduced myself in my language. I was trying to remember some of the things I was supposed to say. I usually rush through it, but I wanted to do a good job. So today I introduced my clans. I have a couple water clans. I'm Dene, not Dene. The program says I'm Dene. I'm not Dene, I'm Dene. The Dene are our relatives up in Saskatchewan. I'm from the U.S., the southwestern part of the United States. I come from New Mexico. I said first where my mother comes from, which is actually where that mesa is, where it goes down like that. That's where my mom's side is from. So my family is indigenous from this area. So we've lived here for hundreds of years. And my dad's side, the next thing I said was my dad is from Vicente, which from this picture is this way. And today, my family still lives in this community, which is called Crown Point, New Mexico, where we've lived for hundreds of years. It's one of the oldest cities, or it's not a city, but it probably was maybe a long time ago. This is close to Chaco. So Chaco was, about 1100 AD, very huge civilization. So this is about 45 miles, maybe 50 kilometers from Chaco Canyon, and this is called Crown Point, New Mexico. The photo you're looking at is a fully licensed ISL processing plant. So I got involved in the uranium fight because I learned that Uranium Resources, Inc., back then it was HRI, was fully licensed to do ISL mining since 1989, when I was 8. So I learned about it when I was like 26, and that's when I got involved. So my family has very little knowledge of what this facility is, and most of the people in town do not know what this facility is, nor what it is for, and much less what is uranium mining, what is uranium used for, and then even less about the nuclear fuel chain and all the waste issues. So my job, I call it my job. I am not employed by anyone. I do this work voluntarily. I work right now we're building an organization called Dine, No Nukes, and I'll explain that in a minute. So my job, what I do, my life's work, is to make sure this never opens. And on top of that, learning how little everyone knows about uranium. I grew up in this area, and I thought I was pretty smart. But if I didn't learn about this stuff until after I graduated from college, after I was already 26 years old, then I realized I wasn't that smart. And so I need to learn. I have a lot to learn, and so does my community. So the number one priority of Dine No Nukes is to do education across Dinetra. So I will get into that next. Okay, so here is the Navajo Nation, as everyone knows it today. You can see the United States, and that orange area is where we call Navajo Nation. Navajo Nation is the government that represents our people. It is not the true representation of Dene people. As a Dene person, I am indigenous. We have our language, our culture, our land, our ways still intact. Our language is not in danger. We have everything within the 4 sacred mountains still there, and a lot of contamination. So this is how our nation was formed. First, it started with the Treaty of 1868, and then it grew by executive order. So this is where the Navajo Nation has its jurisdiction. And that's important because our tribe passed a law against uranium mining in 2005. This is Dinetra. Dinetra is within the 4 sacred mountains. So if you think about this, I need to put them together, but this reservation, or our nation, is only about, it's a smaller part of the entire area that Dene people consider home. So as Dene people, our traditional homelands, we call it Dinetra, and it's this whole area. And then Navajo Nation is only right there. So you can see our 4 sacred mountains in this map. None of them are within our nation. None of them are within our jurisdiction. And as a very sacred place, it's dangerous that these are not within our area of authority. And so currently today, one of the biggest threats is a new conventional mine called Roca Honda on Mount Taylor, which is the one on the bottom right. So I drive by that twice a week. I see this mountain all the time. You can see it from Albuquerque. I live in the city. I live in Albuquerque, which is that red dot. And my community, the picture I showed you, is right about here. Okay, so I just wanted to orient everyone and explain the difference between Navajo Nation and Dene people. So the government is not necessarily doing what the people want, because in 2013, one of our own Navajo Nation leaders tried to make a loophole in our Navajo Nation law that says no uranium mining. And we fought that. We fought that successfully and won last year. And so this is just a picture to explain how all of the legal challenges have been set up since the 1860s and then the 1872 mining law. And today we have several other laws that are making our work much more difficult. And so on Navajo Nation and in several other Native communities, there are these things called allotments. So Indian allotments are privately owned lands that was created by the Dawes Act, or the General Allotment Act. And so what that did, that was the United States, their form of divide and conquer. So today, when you look at the Navajo Nation, the reservation is one huge landmass, but on the New Mexico side, so on the Arizona side, everything is in one jurisdiction, but on the New Mexico side, it's all checkerboard. And that means the areas that we're fighting on the New Mexico side of the border, I'm sorry, that's the 4 corners. So the top is Utah, the top left is Utah, Colorado, Arizona, New Mexico. So the bottom right side in New Mexico, the Navajo Nation is not one nation. It's divided into several different land statuses, land ownership that could be state, federal, private, and then it's also a split estate. So the surface might be owned by some other entity and the mineral rights might be owned by a company or another entity. And so the biggest danger we have are the allotments owned by Dene people who are pro-uranium, because there are no jobs out here, and a lot of those folks with nowhere to go to work are easily convinced to sell their mineral rights to a uranium company. And this is problematic because right now there's also a fracking boom. So the same tactic is being used to get land leases to frack in this area. So that's just a little bit about the history of the United States and the effect of colonization and how it continues to make our work much more difficult. So this is showing a little bit about all of the abandoned mine lands in the United States. So it says here there's over 4,000 discrete mines, but 10,400 mine lands, mine features. So that could be a waste pile, it could be maybe an exploratory well, or it could be a huge buried pile of tires that people think is a natural formation. And because uranium mining stopped in our state in 1981, so anyone who was born after 1981 or was a child at that time has no recollection of what the natural landscape looked like. So when I speak to some of the elders out there, it's really interesting to hear them say, that's a hill of buried wastes. Oh, that used to be our sacred mountain, and then they just buried a bunch of waste there. So there are a lot of sacred places that are now contaminated by mine waste. Okay, so this is talking about the history of the United States, the Navajo Nation. So right now, you don't have to read this. Basically, the mining started in the 40s, and from the 40s to the 70s, all of that mining was not done under current regulations. So there are over 520 abandoned mine lands on Navajo Nation alone, which are in the process of being cleaned up. So I used to talk a lot about ISL mining, and the differences between conventional mining and ISL mining. This is just to give you an idea what conventional mining is. I'm sure everybody knows. And then here's a map of the contaminated areas on Navajo. So this is only on Navajo. There are, like I said, the 10,000 other sites. I'm not sure if they all have an inventory like this, because Navajo Nation is working with the US EPA to do these 5-year cleanup plans. However, most of the money has not been spent on cleanup, but on hauling water to people who are living with contaminated water. So this is an aerial view of Church Rock. Church Rock, I like to call it ground zero. Church Rock, technically this is not Church Rock. I just found out from the community this is called something else. But for a lack of a name in English, we call it Church Rock. This is about 15 miles northeast of Gallup, which is the closest community. I went to high school in Gallup, and I never knew about any of these things, like I said, until 10, 15 years later. So what we're looking at are 3 major sites. First is the community we call Redwater Pond Road. So there's some people out there living between 2 abandoned conventional mines. These 2 conventional mines go about half a mile into the earth, and so the community, the mines are on either side of the community, and there's about 6 residences in the middle. And so that's what the Navajo EPA and the EPA consider the most contaminated site. And so they're trying to get the families to move. So today, in 2015, there is still relocation of indigenous peoples by the United States federal government. The communities do not want to move, but it's dangerous there. So as Dene people, we have 2 homes. We have a summer home and a winter home. So the home they're at now, I forget if it's their summer or winter home, but they're being moved to the other location. So part of that cleanup money is being spent to build them a house, traditional hogan, and provide access to it, road, power lines, transmission lines, that kind of thing. So the community, I'll show you some photos in a minute, is there. And then the site of the world's largest uranium spill that occurred on July 16, 1979. July 16th is also the same day as the Trinity explosion that occurred in 1945. And I like to add that July 16th, 2007 was when I officially started uranium work. So this area here is a very contaminated area, and I'm going to point to where the families live and then where the spill site is. And then the last thing I'm going to point to is where the proposal for an ISL facility that is fully licensed. The first picture I showed you guys is one of 2 locations. So the ISL facility that's fully licensed, that has not started, they intend to do mining. Oh, cool, this thing works. So right here, this is where the mine, one of the mines, there's 2 mines I mentioned. So here's one of the mines, here's the other, and then the community is located in here. You can see some of the little houses. And then this is an older photo because none of these buildings are here. This is where the mill was, and then the dam that broke leaked over 90 million gallons of liquid contaminated waste through this dry river all the way 100 miles into Arizona. And today, that has not been cleaned up. It has not been characterized. According to the EPA's website, they went downstream about 8 miles and removed a little bit of stuff and put it in 50-gallon drums, 55-gallon drums, and that was about it. So there's a really excellent movie I like to share called The River That Harms. You can just Google it, and it's online. You guys, it's all about the spill. It's an old movie. I think people who know Chris Shuey will get a kick out of that one because it shows him in his much younger days. But I like to show that movie because nothing has changed from when the movie was made, or when the spill happened, pretty much. And the place I was dealing with is around over here somewhere, where the ISL mine is located. There's nothing there now, just a bunch of flags in the ground marking where the facility will be. What is the time? So this is one of the health effects and one of the concerns that we have for why we do not want this type of mining to occur. And this is a sheep that was born in the Redwater Pond Road community. And we, as Dene people, we eat the sheep. So we are very concerned what happens to us and what will happen to our future generations. This is a picture of the community, and you can see toys on the ground. Well, I guess this is a different photo. So here's the house, and then this is what it looked like with some grass. After they did the cleanup, they scraped up the topsoil, and pretty much none of the grass grew back the same way. And when it rains, because there's no vegetation holding that top layer, the water just washes down. And so right now, where those residences are, you see the top of the hill? That water rushes down and goes down these roads, and it flows behind one of the local houses. So along the road, the access road, they have those drainage ditches. Those have high readings because when the water comes down, it collects alongside the road. And yes, so that's what the community is still dealing with even after cleanup. So now I'm already out of time, but I think I got through the bulk of what I wanted to convey is the really serious situation we're dealing with at home. I do not live in a contaminated area. I am actually a very privileged Dene person. My parents had good jobs. I went to college. I'm very educated. I get to travel to Canada and do these kinds of talks. But the reality is most people at home have no idea that this meeting is even going on. And the reality is nobody at home has any idea how to address this problem. And so my job coming out here is to help to find those things to take home and to share with my community, the solutions and all the good work that you all are doing. So this is a picture of the world's largest. I'm going to go now into just a bunch of photos of how uranium mining has impacted other indigenous communities in North America. Excuse me. So this is Jackpile Mine, which is in Laguna, about 45 minutes out of Albuquerque. Albuquerque is one of the largest cities in New Mexico, but most of the people don't know this is just 45 minutes away. I went on a plane. I took a little plane trip 2 weeks ago, and I took a lot of photos. I thought I would have enough time to fix my presentation. But in the air, you can see, this is all on Google. All these are from Google. You guys can just Google Jackpile and zoom in. From the air, this whole area is really white. It looks like dirt. The rest of the area is covered with green. So when I was flying over last week, you can see the beautiful mountains. Then all of a sudden, you just see this big empty space, which is Jackpile. So it's very visible. This is the threat of Roca Honda, which is a very new thing because all of the past legacy mines around the mountain, they're still there. This one is called Mount Taylor Mine, and that's one of the mines that is in standby trying to restart. There are several on the mountain, but I'm pointing that one out because it's the closest to Roca Honda, which has not been developed yet. And so this would be the first brand new mine in New Mexico. We're very concerned about that because, as I mentioned, that is a sacred mountain. And the Acoma folks are on this side, the Pueblo of Acoma and the Pueblo of Laguna, and they have issues there because of the water concern. Here's a picture of the fracking boom that's going on. There is uranium in the Mancos Shale. I think someone hit the light back there. So I just wanted to show that to you because besides fracking, there is also coal mining in the area. I didn't get a picture of the coal mining. So one of the things that I emphasize to other folks is as indigenous people, we do organizing very differently. We usually incorporate a lot of talking. We incorporate a lot of social activity and a lot of coming together. And it's a very slow process that involves a lot of listening, and it takes a long time for us to even get to know each other. So before Native people can work together, especially cross cultures with non-natives, I think myself as an indigenous person, I've been to a lot of meetings with only indigenous people, and then some with a little bit of indigenous people, and then some with no indigenous people. We're the only one. It is definitely a different type of dynamic when you're in a room with all indigenous people, and it's a very powerful thing. And basically, I'm showing you all these pictures because it's really important, I think, for all of you to understand what I'm talking about, to actually visit these places and maybe get to know some of the folks who work on these issues from the ground, who are on the ground actually confronting the governments and having to not just fight, but also to live in contaminated areas. These are pictures of very well-known people. This is Carrie Dan. She worked on the gold mining in in Nevada, which is also near all of the test bombing that occurred. So this is a school in South Dakota. This hill right here is a mill tailings pile, and it blows radioactive dust to the school with readings higher than what is 4 times higher than at Fukushima. This is in Elam, Alaska. This is a group called Students Against Uranium, and so they're very happy. They just won a big water rights thing up there. They had support from like 44 tribes, so they're doing a lot of organizing. Alaska's huge, and there's a lot of uranium mining issues. This is I would say the best, but maybe it's just my favorite group to work with, because in WMAN, Western Mining Action Network, we deal with all the mining, but this is the Indigenous Caucus. So we had about 60 people in this room, and it took us 2 hours to do introductions. We'd never got to even talk about the issue. So everyone was upset at the facilitator. I am now the current chair of the Indigenous Caucus, so we try to get through. We do introductions first, and then we meet the second night. So this is another thing about going to the community. This is EPA Regional Director Ron Curry. So I helped to organize this tour where we had the EPA Regional Administrator sitting down in Redwater Pond Road between the abandoned mines, listening directly from the community, speaking to him about the issue. And we got some of these people in the room. That's myself. These are our friends. So we have international visitors all the time. I invite all of you to New Mexico. There's a big event, July 18th. The Redwater Pond Road brings people together to remember that big spill. The spill happened on the 16th. This year, the event is on the 18th. This is in Saskatchewan, so our relatives up in the Dene Nation are dealing with big, huge corporations, bigger than us, Chemico and all those big ones. So we had to fly out there, and one of the issues we learned about was Walston Lake, where all the area had been mined already. The little community village was on this side of the lake, and the company was proposing to mine under the lake. And they were very concerned. We're concerned about our sheep. They're concerned about their caribou and other animals, birds. And so we have and a lot of the people in these pictures are in the room. It's so nice to be around friends. When we do our work, this is what I'm talking about. We have the strategies also from our years of fighting the United States government and just our years of existing as people. Doug was talking about running in the morning. Running is a very important activity. We're supposed to run every morning to the east and also pray every morning. So this is at one of our meetings. We had a WMAN meeting, and during this gathering, we're having the prayer done by 2 people from the bottom of the Grand Canyon, which is also a sacred place. So a lot of the mining that took place, we're doing a prayer. It's at the beginning of a meeting, a planning meeting. So this was something that is very important to incorporate as part of our strategy. And so I tried to talk about sacred places, just so you guys know that this issue is not just the health aspect, but we have several other issues. And as Native people, when the sacred places become hurt, we become hurt. So it is a type of health issue. It's a mental health issue. It's something that is going to affect our culture forever after these things happen. So what we're doing is not only preserving the environment for ourselves today, but these cultural resources for our future and for our children to continue to practice our ways. So that's the rest of my presentation. I think we have a few minutes for questions and answers, just a little bit of time. So thank you very much. I really appreciate the organizers and all of you for coming. Yeah.